So welcome everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Allison Cooney, and along with my husband Gord, we are the owners of Skydive Vancouver Island. And I'm super excited to be hosting the 2025 Virtual Safety Day. Thank you to everybody who is attending virtually. We are going to have it recorded as well, as you guys are all aware. So I've got a great lineup of speakers tonight. Super excited for that as well. I believe this is our fifth year doing this. 2020 was the very first year because of COVID. And we've kind of gone back and forth on the idea of whether or not we should go back to just being at the drop zone. But I think this has just been such a wonderful opportunity to not only connect as a community here on the island, but we have people from Manitoba and Alberta and from other places. And so I think it's just a great opportunity. And it's also nice to be able to record these, put them on our safety YouTube channel that we have, and so that we can always go back and reference them. So we do have quite a lineup today, but I just want everyone to be fully aware. If you're not familiar with Zoom, as we go through this presentation, if there's questions or anything like that, I will be moderating it for our speakers. There is a little actions icon where you can raise your hand. And then that way I'll know that you have a question and we can address it. And then there's also a lower hand option. So without further delay, I'll just get into the agenda. For some reason, I had it all fancy, but I don't need it fancy. So this is our agenda tonight. This is our welcome to everybody. We are going to have a section on equipment that might come in a little later because I don't know where Aiden is right now. But worst case scenario, I might actually just play a recent CSPA video that was done. It's just a 7-minute thing about your actual checking your gear. But then we will go into pre-boarding, the flight, everything usual that we see, just different presenters and different ways and approaches around it to bring everybody up to speed again. So we have the skydive in the air, under canopy and landing. I'm super excited to have two sections in particular presented by Ashley and by Beth. One is we're going to be talking about progression and complacency in our sport and the importance of doing everything safely. And Beth is going to be talking about separation anxiety. Not the kind that Jack has when I leave him in the RV, but, exit separation and, of course, break off separation on that and tracking away. I'm going to give a little presentation on safety culture, AIM reports, that kind of stuff. And then at that point, if anyone is on this call who doesn't want to sit through our specific Skydive Vancouver Island briefing, you're welcome to get off the call. I'll make sure it's clear at that point. But we'll have a brief kind of overview of stuff at our drop zone, some of the changes that are happening at the drop zone that you guys will all need to be aware of, and talking about the events and all those kind of things as well. And introducing some of the new staff that we have this year. And then we'll have a question and answer. Question and answers will be kind of throughout it all.
You're not in presentation mode.
What's that?
You're not in presentation mode.
Oh, it's supposed to highlight the speaker, so sorry. I don't know if Aiden Walters is here yet. Gord, can you find out if Aiden is there? Aiden is not on this call. So we're going to come back to equipment because it is a big, important thing. So I apologize for that. Aiden is somewhere in Mexico or wherever he's at. So I'm going to just go straight on to our next presenter, which is Austin Lee. If you guys don't know Austin around the drop zone, Austin is a CSPA Coach 1. He's been skydiving now for, Austin, when did you learn? 2 years ago?
Yeah,
it's been about 2 years. So I'm just going to hand the floor over to you, Austin, and we're going to start talking about the pre-boarding.
Okay, so my presentation is going to be in 2 parts. First of all, at the drop zone, be ready when you show up at the drop zones, even before you show up, physically and also mentally. If you're a little bit hungover and drinking, maybe not a good idea to jump. And once you're ready, plan out your skydive. So first of all, have a rough idea of what you're gonna do. And especially if you're a newer jumper, once you get a solo license, it's your responsibility to know what you need to do for your next license. So if you don't know, there's a skill grid on the CSPA website. And if you jump at SVI, there's also a skill grid at the in the equipment room at the job zone. And next one's goal setting. That's you set up your SMART goal, so it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and also time bound. And next steps, plan your the details of this jump. So first of all, know what the wind is doing, know the jump run, know the spot, and have a rough idea what your separation should be. And next, plan your skydive, know what you're doing, what type of exit that you're doing, what you're actually doing during the jump, what your break-off altitude should be, talk to the people that you jump with, and also know your landing pattern. And after you plan out the jump, do some practice, do some dirt dive at the drop zone. And if you're jumping SVI on the van ride to the airport, do some mental rehearsal. And next, before you leave the drop zone, do a quick equipment check so you know once you get there, it's not like, oh, I don't have a whatever on the rig. And lastly, most important, bring all your stuff on the van. So especially your rig. And once you get to the drop zone, turn your AAD on, know the what the offset is at your airport. So if you jump in SVI is plus 150. And next, do your gear check before you put the rig on. So there's a couple of stuff to check. First of all, the 3x3 checks. So there are 3 handles, your main, your cutaway, and your reserve, and you have 3 straps, your 2 leg straps, and your chest strap, and also your 3 accessories. Depending on the kind of helmet that you're wearing, you might have a goggle and also your LT. Next, check your RSL, make sure that it's connected. It's a very easy thing to miss. And lastly, check the 2 pins that you have, your reserve pin and your main pin. And also when you're checking the straps, give it a good pull. So don't just like eyeball it because it's very easy to miss the routing. And after you put your rig on, ask someone else to check you as well to double check. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today. And I'll pass it on to Nick, I believe.
Well, before we get to Nick, pardon me, thank you so much, Austin. And yeah, like we talk about that pre-boarding and those gear checks, and it's simple, but it's routine in building that. Although Aiden is not on this call, the CSPA, I'm going to go back a little bit to equipment. CSPA Technical and Safety Committee put a amazing article, a video together about your equipment and how to check it. And so I am going to play that video. It is not very long, for everyone to just kind of get a good base understanding. It's really educational. Dustin, I may ask you to step in if there's anything that should be added to that area. I'm sorry to ad hoc that your way, but obviously sometimes things happen. So bear with me. I'm just going to share this video with you guys. Here we go. And please let me know if it's playing okay.
Locate your equipment and ensure you have the correct rig. Turn on or check the AAD. Set it to the appropriate setting for the skydive if necessary. Should you see an unfamiliar code in the setup process, stop the check and look to a local rigger for help. Open the reserve flap. Check to see that the reserve closing pin is inserted into the reserve closing loop and seated in the limiting tape at the bottom of the grommet. Check that the closing loop is void of damage. Notice the condition of the pin, the swage, and the ripcord cable, along with the routing of any visible RSL, Collins, and skyhook components. Note the rigger seal and cable routing through guide rings if visible. Manipulate the ripcord handle, proving continuity from ripcord handle to the pin. Check that the 3-ring release system is correctly rigged, in that only one ring passes through the next size ring and that the Type 2 nylon passes through the grommet in the center of the riser, followed by the cutaway cable housing eyelet, and is completed with the cutaway cable passing through the Type 2 nylon. Verify the security of the ripcord handle. Ensure it is seated fully into its pocket and that the Velcro is fully mated. Periodically crack the Velcro to ensure it will release. If visible, further check the condition of the cable swage. Check the condition of the visible webbing on the front of the rig. Pay special attention to fraying at the edges that approaches the off-color thread near the edge of the webbing. Check the condition of the hardware, looking for cracks, wear points, and for potential friction bar failure. Inspect the cutaway handle. Ensure that the Velcro is properly mated. Ensure the cables are routed correctly through the chest strap. Ensure that the cutaway cable housing is properly anchored where it meets the handle. Check the right 3-ring release system in the same way as you check the left. Verify the attachment of the reserve static line shackle. This step may require familiarity with the equipment. Open the pack closure protective flap and ensure the bridle is routed properly with the main pin seated deep enough into the main closing loop. Inspect the visible portion of the closing loop for damage. Ensure there is color on the visible portion of kill line and that any excess bridle is secured running to the BOC pouch. Ensure the pilot chute is secured in the BOC pouch and that the deployment handle is properly positioned.
You told him, don't rub your eye.
All right. Get back to my Zoom meeting. Perfect. So that's a video that CSPA produced, the technical and safety this past year. There are a couple more that are online as well. Dustin, would there be anything else? I know that was kind of equipment. There's so much on equipment and taking care of your equipment. There is also a checklist on the CSPA website. It's all under the safety tab, just so you guys know, and it's educational sources. That's there. There's checklists, and I'll talk about that resource page for CSPA further in this presentation. And we will talk about packing a little bit later too, through the AIM reports. But Dustin, is there anything else you would want to add as far as equipment goes and just understanding, other than ask for help if you don't know?
Sure, just real quick. When I teach my coach courses, I intentionally leave like either the chest strap undone or an RSL disconnected every time. And I would say about 80% of the people, of the coach candidates, miss it. So check the equipment like you're actually looking for something wrong, and expect that there is going to be something wrong, and be pleasantly surprised when there's not, rather than looking at gear expecting everything to be fine. That would be my only feedback about that. I saw Matt Acton's question in the chat. We can speak to that at the end. I can answer that question.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. Sorry for the ad hoc there, but why not use CSPA resources that are out there and people worked hard on? So perfect. So I'm just going to go back to my presentation. All right. So Mr. Nick Byers is joining us today to talk about the flight. For those of you who don't know Nick, He's very experienced in the skydiving world, but also is a commercial pilot and has flown many flights for skydivers. So, Nick, the floor is yours.
Right on. Welcome, everybody. Thanks, Allison and Gord, for having me. Many of you know me as a washed up skydiver. The rest of you that don't, I used to fly skydivers. I used to skydive. With any luck and with Gordon Allison's help, I'll be able to get back into the sport here this summer again. So just going based off of Allison's wonderful slide presentation, we'll work through a couple things, and then I'll go on about a couple of my pet peeves, most specifically around flying in the 182. Given that Gordon and Allison primarily have the 182 and the 206, it kind of works. And then making sure that we cover all these topics. So always a good thing to know your pilot, and it's always nice to know the experience of your pilot, especially if you're at a small drop zone. Obviously a lot of pilots are fairly new commercial pilots. Many of them don't have a lot of time flying airplanes, and many of them are new-ish to the sport of skydiving, often don't have many skydives themselves. So making sure that you're hyper aware of safety, specifically for yourself around the airplane, but making sure that you communicate with your pilot, know where their experience level is at, and if something seems amiss, then make sure that you have a conversation either with them or the drop zone owner or the DZ safety officer to make sure that things are as safe as they can be. The flight is arguably one of the more dangerous parts of the skydive, and so making sure that everybody's on the same page is always a good thing. Typically at SVI, we're boarding 182s and or the 206. Obviously, every once in a while we have some bigger aircraft come down, but the primary birds are Cessna 182 and 206. Both of those aircraft are boarded from behind. So making sure that when we are boarding the aircraft, the pilot is aware that you are coming near them, especially if the engine is running. Okay. If the engine's running and you're meant to be boarding and the pilot is twiddling their thumbs or looking off in another direction, has no idea where you are, they don't know that you're coming towards the airplane. And so they may, rev the engine, they may try to move, which could cause an injury. So please make sure that you're making some form of visual communication with the pilot before you get in the airplane. As you're making your way to the airplane, as is should be part of any pre-boarding conversation or checks with everybody, make sure that you've got a plan for who's getting into the plane first, who's getting in last, which is of course going to be the opposite of the exit order, and making sure that you know where and how everybody's sitting. If you're new to jumping one of these particular aircraft, then please ask. Make sure that you say something, because we don't want to accidentally do something that we shouldn't do or be in the wrong place in the airplane. The next thing on the slideshow's list here, or SVI's list, is the takeoff. Again, one of the more important aspects of the flight for those that are the pilot, but another dangerous aspect of things. It's important that passengers, cargo, if you will, is not moving around during the takeoff roll, is not interrupting the pilot, is not causing any sort of grief, so that the pilot can focus solely on the takeoff. Because if there's an emergency in the first little bit of the flight, that's going to be a dodgy situation, and we need to be able to focus on managing the situation immediately. So please make sure that during the takeoff, you're seated, your seatbelts are on, and you're calm, cool, and collected as we're making our way onto the runway and into the takeoff roll. If for some reason you see something that is out of line and is an immediate threat to the takeoff, the aircraft, or to the skydive overall that needs to be addressed before we take off, please say something right away. If for some reason it's nothing major that can be addressed once we're off the ground, in the air, and safely flying away, then hold on to that piece of information before you interrupt the pilot midway down the runway or right at the rotation. The next thing on here is going to be aircraft emergencies. I guess I don't necessarily want to go through all possible aircraft emergencies with you, but make sure that you have in your head an altitude for when you would expect to be getting out of the airplane versus landing with the airplane. So typically below a set altitude, be it 1,000 or 1,500 feet, you're going to be landing with the aircraft. And in some certain situations, it might even be a little bit higher than that. And we're all going to kind of put our heads between our legs and kiss our butts goodbye if something were to happen. But know in your mind what altitude it is that you are comfortable getting out on your reserve parachute. And then, of course, know what altitude you are comfortable getting out at on your main parachute if there's an aircraft emergency. If you notice something, say an engine on fire, that for some reason your pilot hasn't noticed, if you smell smoke, if you notice something, say something, because it could become a more serious emergency and maybe it needs to be dealt with immediately. That said, if there is an emergency in the aircraft, don't just open up the door and jump out. Please make sure that you communicate with the pilot and make sure that the pilot is okay with you getting out. There could be a certain situation where ballast is going to be our best friend, and we're going to need you to stay in the airplane. It may not be safe for you to get out of the airplane. And maybe you've been chatting with your friends because that's what you do as the plane is taking off and you're not stressed about it. And you didn't notice that we're now over a 1,500-foot mountain and we're only at 2,000 feet on your altimeter. If you were to get out in that situation, it's not going to be ideal. So there needs to be an open line of communication on any sort of aircraft emergency. You need to know what altitude you're going to get out of the airplane at on your reserve versus on your main. And you need to be aware of everybody else in the airplane, how long it might take you to get out of the airplane, and how to manage yourself when you need to, if one of those emergency situations should arrive. Which brings me on Allison's list to the exit. There's a few things to talk about here. Most importantly is that technically the pilot is the one in charge of when that door opens. And while I am of the opinion, while I'm flying the airplane, that if I'm comfortable with somebody opening the door, that's fine, but they don't do it until they're told they can open the door. And so, Gordon, Allison, I don't know your SOPs, but generally speaking, pilots should be the ones opening the door unless otherwise stated. Okay. When you're working on when you're doing your exit and you're looking to get out of the airplane, make sure that you're looking down before you start climbing out. Pilots are great at spotting if they have been skydivers or if they've been well trained or they're very experienced. New pilots, however, are not the best at spotting. And let's be honest, it's your responsibility to be doing the spotting, not the pilot's. The pilot's job is to get you to altitude as safely and efficiently as possible, ideally in the perfect spot, but you need to look down and make sure that you're where you want to be. If ever there's a question about the spot, again, open line of communication, have a conversation quickly with the pilot. If you need to adjust the spot, give a hand signal, shout, whatever is going to work so that you can communicate clearly to the pilot what it is that you need before you start your climb out. When you start your climb out, make sure that you are checking all of your handles and protecting the dangerous parts of your equipment. So making sure that you're not dragging your BOC or one of your pins across the frame of the door. Making sure that if you see somebody doing that, you help prevent it from happening. Putting a hand on the BOC, putting a hand over wiffle ball or hacky sack or whatever you want to call the handle of your pilot chute. Pushing somebody just a touch forward so that their pin cover doesn't come undone as they make their way out of the airplane. And especially in the 182 and the 206, when you're climbing out onto the step, trying to make sure that you're making your movements as smooth and efficient as possible, but also as quick as possible. Especially if there are multiple groups getting out of these small airplanes. It takes time to climb out of a 182. It takes time to climb out of a 206. And if there are multiple groups, then it just kind of hoses everybody else on the spot if you're the first person out and you're taking a really, really long time. Okay. Again, the most important parts there, making sure that you're protecting your equipment, making sure that you've gotten a green light from the pilot, making sure that you're in the right spot. And again, in an emergency situation, if somebody's pilot chute comes out, somebody's container opens, knowing how you're going to manage that situation, whether you're pushing them off of the airplane, whether it's in the airplane and you're able to pull the person back in, review your emergency procedures, including in aircraft and exit procedures, so that you know how to manage those situations appropriately. Any questions about the general points that I've made here?
I do not see any hands up, so I think you're good to go. Keep going, Nick.
Perfect. So, being the cranky old man that I am, I'm gonna quickly talk about a couple of my biggest pet peeves, especially in the 182. But my biggest pet peeves flying in small Cessna aircraft that jumpers and instructors are notorious for doing, and hopefully you can avoid doing them this summer and not interrupt or distract or cause grief for the pilots flying at Skydive Vancouver Island or whatever drop zone you're jumping at this year. My biggest pet peeve is when people start pulling on the pilot seat. And I say this for a number of reasons. Number one, that pilot seat is the only thing that's preventing me from falling backwards and pulling backwards on the yoke, nosing up the aircraft, stalling it, and killing us all. If I don't have the back to my seat, I assure you I do not have the core strength to sit upright and continue to control the airplane. So please don't pull on the back of my seat, especially because they're very easy to break. And if I remember correctly from years of working with the aircraft themselves, they're not super easy to find, and they sure as shit aren't cheap. So if you break it, it's going to cost a fortune, but you're going to ground the aircraft for the rest of the day if you don't ground the aircraft within a couple minutes because everybody's going in. So please don't pull on the back of the pilot seat. That goes for the tandem instructor or the IAD or PFF instructor sitting in the jump master seat. That goes for the person sitting in the old man seat behind the pilot getting up and turning around. Don't push or pull on that pilot seat, please. And alongside that goes hitting the controls, especially in the 182. Those controls, if you're sitting in the jump master seat, if you're sitting facing the back of the airplane with your back to the control panel, next to the door, the controls are up here on your right shoulder. And if you lean back or if you lean too far over, you can either push everything in, which could overspeed the prop, or increase the thrust at the wrong time. If you hit it from the side, you could bend that control and prevent us from being able to use the controls and safely get out of an emergency situation should something happen. So please try to be very cognizant of where you are and what you're touching in the airplane. Remember, in the 182, there is a fuel control selector switch on the floor between the jump master seat and the pilot. If you hit it, then you could turn off the engine of the aircraft. Not ideal, especially at low altitude. So again, keep your hands to yourselves, please. And for those IAD instructors in the room, static line instructors, hell, even PFF instructors, when you are, and you know what, honestly, even tandems, if you're sitting on your bum facing the back of the airplane, when you're trying to get out of the way so that somebody can move past you out of the door, if you're trying to get your student as a tandem instructor's feet out the door, rather than leaning back against the control panel of the aircraft, sit yourself up high. Use the space above you, you have lots of it, so that people can get past you and you are less likely to hit the controls. So if you are on your knees and your rig is back sort of against the control panel, if you lean back, your elbow or your shoulder might hit the controls. If you just kind of make yourself really tall, extend your spine up, pretend like you're taking a yoga class, you'll get out of the way. You will make far more space than if you are trying to just push back against the control panel. So please do that instead of leaning back or pushing yourself back into the control panel. And then actually, this might be my biggest pet peeve. Don't ask me to do 0G maneuvers. Don't ask me to keep the airplane in ground effect and pull back at the last second at the end of the runway and try and gain altitude in exchange for airspeed when we're taking off. Just don't ask for it, especially if there is a student on the airplane. Our job and our duty is to make sure that this is as safe and comfortable for these people as possible. These sorts of maneuvers will make customers sick. They put the aircraft and the passengers at risk, and they're just not safe. As much fun as they are sometimes, please don't ask for it. It makes it far easier for us as pilots to not have to say no, or to make us piss off it prevents us from having to piss off the drop zone owners and the mechanic by doing it and getting in trouble. If you're one of the pilots for the drop zone that's in here that I don't recognize on the chat, please don't do these procedures, or please don't do these maneuvers. High performance maneuvers have no place with skydivers on board, especially if there is a student on the airplane. End rant. Any other questions or concerns from anybody about the flight, the airplane, or me being a cranky old man?
I love it. Beth, I was laughing as you were just nodding your head, nodding your head, nodding your head. And yeah, Nick, you covered everything just eloquently and what we needed. I don't see any questions. Does anyone? I don't think Gord has anything to add. I think you added everything from his side of perspective, definitely. Especially the part of plane parts are really expensive and very hard to get right now. So if it's skydivers who are messing stuff up, it's not a happy day for anyone.
Yeah, don't be that guy. Don't make the plane go down and be on the ground because you were pissing around in the airplane.
Yeah. And it's okay. The other thing I just wanted to mention too, it's okay if there's something I notice sometimes our 206 step gets a little bit loose. Like we don't know that when it's up in the air. Let Gord know. Gord is our PRM. If you see anything, let the pilot know, and then pilot will let Gord know. So that's important as well. So it's okay. And I do think that just be mindful of the back little door on the 206, that you're not clipping that handle and that door is opening up or anything like that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Aiden Walters has joined the call. Aiden, we did watch a video of that CSPA provided of your equipment checks and all of that kind of stuff. And Dustin did talk a couple little notes there just about the equipment as well. I don't know if Aiden, you have anything in specific that you would like to add to the equipment section. I know you unfortunately weren't here for when we went to it. I don't even know if Aiden's able to talk. Yeah, I think you might be muted.
There we go.
Hi, Aiden. So yeah, hello. Aiden, just so you know, I apologize, or I know you're in remote, but I did play a CSPA video. We went through all the whole equipment check systems and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if within the next 5 minutes, if there's stuff that you would like to add to equipments.
I'm going to mostly leave it with what you've gone through. The one thing that I'll add that I keep seeing everywhere I've ever been, if you have a question on gear, don't ask your buddy that just started. They're wrong as often as they're right, maybe more often. There's, our coaches are not allowed to teach emergency procedures for a reason, only the instructors are. So if we do that with the people that are already up at that level, odds are your buddy that's getting going with you probably shouldn't be teaching a lot of things either. Knowing them, believing it, but always go to the right source. Don't just, don't rely on your buddy who started at the same time you do and you both got 20 jumps and say, hey, it's wonderful. Or 200 jumps. If you don't know, make sure you're talking to the right person. And seeing I didn't see the rest, I'll leave it at that.
All right. And Aiden, I appreciate that too. And I think it goes on the other side as well. If someone's asking you a question and you're not sure, everybody knows don't ask me questions about packing because I don't pack. Be honest about that. You don't have to BS your way through something. Just send them to somebody who would know. This comes into really big play. We'll talk a little bit about the AIM reporting a little bit later on, but packing was definitely red flagged as a issue in some of the accidents and incidences that happened. And so just as we want to pay due diligence on our gear checks and all those kind of things, make sure you understand how to pack. And I have to actually admit that majority of them were packed by somebody not jumping that gear. So just being mindful if you have, different equipment or you're using somebody that you're not used to, just making sure that that person is familiar with your gear and packing it. Otherwise, pack it yourself, and always reference the manufacturer. Some containers pack differently. As little as I know about stuff, I do know some containers are packed differently. So, and I do know that at every drop zone, whether you're at our drop zone, Campbell River, Manitoba, there's going to be someone at that drop zone who can help answer your questions about packing. Packing is very important. So just as much so as gear check. So thanks, Aiden. I'm really jealous of where you're at right now because it looks beautiful.
He looks a little bit tan too.
He looks a little bit tan. So I feel like I want Aiden off the screen now. Awesome. Thank you so much, Aiden. All right, I'm going to go into sharing my, sorry. It's always that time of year where I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do Zoom calls again. All right, and thank you again, Nick. So next up, we have Riley Huntley, who is Riley's a coach too with CSPA, and he's going to be covering the in the air portion of our skydive. We've kind of broken this up just so that it's not one person that has to cover a whole aspect. But I think many of you are familiar with Riley. And if you're not, you're going to get to know him very soon once he gets on this call. So Riley, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. I'll get into kind of the most dynamic part of the jump usually. So the skydive, focusing on the in the air portion. This is everything that we've trained for. We've put it all together. I'm going to focus on knowing your limits, skydiving with others, altitude awareness, break off, a bit of the break off track. I'll leave the rest for the separation anxiety section, and then a little bit on deployment. So let's dive in. To start off here, we need to know your limits. So obviously skydiving is exhilarating. There's a reason we're all addicted to the sport, but ego has no place in the plane or in the sky. But knowing your limits doesn't mean staying in your comfort zone either. It just means knowing when to say, not today, maybe not this jump, or let's simplify this plan. I think an underlying theme that are in the PIMs when you read through them is that your progression is personal. You can't compare to what another jumper is doing or what you see on Instagram. That'll lead you to a lot of disappointment, both as a jumper and in life. So we don't want to be chasing jumps or formations that are beyond our training. We want to be matching the dive to our ability and not skipping steps. It's already been touched on that fatigue, dehydration, bad night's sleep, you're hungover, whatever it is, those are all going to affect your reaction time, your altitude awareness, your judgment. So you might be licensed to do something, but are you actually prepared to do that? Or not just like, can I do this? It's a different story. We should be considering, have you practiced this sequence lately? Have you done a break off at this altitude? Can you reliably track away from a group of this size? And that answer is going to be different for these questions depending on what your discipline is. Before that you're actually boarding the plane, we should be thinking about, do I have the right gear for the jump that I want to do? And if in the case of free flying and rental gear, the answer is going to be no, not a great idea, not safe. You want to think about, have we practiced this exit or the maneuver recently? Have you done that with other people before? And do you know what you're going to do if you end up in an emergency? If you're not sure, you hesitate for any of those, check in with a coach. They might suggest scaling back your plan, maybe changing your role in the dive, or just giving you the reassurance that this is actually the next step in your learning progression. Sometimes it's uncomfy, right? At the end of the day, though, skydiving is one of the few sports where admitting you're not ready might actually earn you more respect. So I hope people don't forget that. When it comes to skydiving with others, this means flying your body in cooperation with other people in the sky, and it requires keeping yourself and your fellow jumpers safe. There's communication that plays into there, there's discipline, and there's awareness. And I think regardless of if you're in a 2-way, you're in a 12-way, a 20-way, everything's hinging on having a clear dive plan, making sure that levels and fall rate control are accounted for, everyone's moving predictably, and there's safe separation that's happening within this. The dirt dive should be done, and it doesn't matter if you're on jump 25, you're on jump 2500. Our goal here is to lock in on the timing individuals. Chances are you're not going to be too successful on a jump unless you've done it multiple times with that person, if you can't actually visualize how that's going to look. And creepers, we have them at the DZ. They're not just for students. They're also pro tools that we can build in to get the most for our money. We know how expensive dives are. We know how expensive the wind tunnel is. Let's not blow a dive or two before we realize we should actually pull out the creepers. Probably not a good use of your money. If you want to blow it, just buy more beer for the fridge. Dustin will thank you. In free fall, we need to be conscious here of our proximity and our heading. So we're matching our levels. We're keeping eye contact, which I struggle the most with, especially in belly. It's almost a bit intimate. It's a bit awkward when you're having this stare off with someone else, but it's going to make for a much better jump. And remembering that we should never be sacrificing safety to, make one last point, make another dock. If you're the least experienced jumper in the group, your job generally is to be stable and predictable. If you're leading, on the other hand, your job is to make the skydive achievable for everyone that's on it. Otherwise, we should be rethinking how that dive's going to go. Ideally, we're setting up everyone for success while still finding a way for everyone to have fun. Sometimes that's not always possible. The jumps probably change a bit. The kind of last two things to consider here on this point is spatial awareness. We need to be aware of our proximity, especially in a group. We don't want to be floating over others. We don't want to be diving too aggressively. And we need to be prepared to stop whatever we're doing because someone else is now in our airspace. The other part is the fall rate control. So we're trying to manage our fall rate control in real time. We can do this prior based off of a jumpsuit and gear matching, having a tighter suit or adding weights, which will increase the fall rate. Manipulating our body position. So we know that larger body position is more drag and therefore a slower fall rate. So a large piece here is just gearing up for the job for success. I know it's going to be a hot summer probably as always, but you're never too cool to actually put on a jumpsuit. I'm going to own that this summer. I've got a new jumpsuit coming and I will be sweating my balls off, but I'm going to be actually dressed for the jump. So I'm proud of that. Not going to enjoy it in the moment. Altitude awareness should be an embedded behavior. It's not just a check at pull time, but it should be a continuous habit. We've all read about and know that stress, tunnel vision, excitement, they're all going to reduce our altitude awareness. And that's why we emphasize building it into our muscle memory. It's not just about knowing our planned break-off altitude, but also our deployment altitude and our hard deck or our emergency altitude. And those are going to look different for different people. Based on how current you are, what equipment that you're using, where you are in your progression. It's going to help if you have both a visual and an audible altitude. Even if you have both, you should be checking your visual altimeter frequently and building checks into our dive flow. If you don't have an audible, though, it's never too late in the season to get one. Keep your eye out for deals in Facebook groups, Marketplace, talk to Allison. There's other dealers that are in this very call right now. Even if you have an audible, we still need to make sure that our visual altimeter is positioned clearly. So if you're suddenly doing a lot of tracking or angle jumps and you don't have an audible, well, you're increasing your risk of losing altitude awareness. But you should also consider maybe getting a pillow or a wedge chest mount for your visual altimeter so that you can actually still see it. If you're doing a group jump, throw in these altimeter checks into your dirt dive and also verbalize in your dirt dive the break off and the deployment altitude. Even if you're doing it on your own, you're not in a group, you should actually visualize those. So you're checking your altimeter. That's the part of building the muscle memory. I think every experienced jumper has a jump where they've went low when they were relying solely on their audible, or they tunnel visioned, or you decided to chase after one more point. And I think we love adding beer to the fridge, but there are less dangerous beer fines that we'd rather have you pay than this one here. So I think just kind of to finish off there, don't chase docks. If the group is unstable or going low, abort early and deploy your planned altitude. Aborting doesn't necessarily mean going off and doing your own jump either, though. Everyone in your group should know where you are for the entirety of the jump. There shouldn't be two separate solo dives happening if it started as a two-way. For the break-off portion, break-off is non-negotiable if you are doing a group jump. You're not just ending a formation, you're actually switching here to flying independent flight class. And with larger groups, we're talking about more bodies separating in close proximity. So we need to keep in mind what our altitude is at and how much altitude you actually need to track away. In the beginning, you know that this is more altitude. As your skills improve and as your opening altitude gets lower, your break-off altitude might get lower, but it depends on how many people are in the formation and what discipline that you're doing. We want to communicate as part of this. It might be a little bit of a shake, giving a small wave to make sure it's clear that you're leaving and you're not just moving to the next point or formation. The last thing you want is another jump following you or holding on to when you're trying to leave. It's important that you track away from the group as opposed to just spiraling around our other jumpers. But the more jumpers you add to the dive plan, the more complicated it gets. We shouldn't assume that tracking away from the group simply means doing a 180. There's more on this later, but especially in disciplines where you've got more jumpers, that could be a recipe for disaster when you have colliding flight paths. But yeah, keep your eyes out for others and what's around you, especially when tracking opposite directions. I think they're going to talk about maybe in the separation anxiety here that inexperienced jumpers often hesitate here. My takeaway is that it's just don't. It's your job to create space and create your own airspace and stick to it. Break-off altitude should be determined before boarding, ideally not in the plane or during free fall. For the break-off track, there's several factors. It's the direction, it's the form, and awareness. Our track isn't actually complete until we've created horizontal distance between yourselves and others. And that's what the track is for, and we should be tracking like your life depends on it. Things that we keep in mind here is that you're going to be more successful if you make sure that you turn away from the group before you begin tracking, and you also stop that turn before you begin the track. Tracking first with our legs to build momentum and keep stability before slowly bringing your arms back, and keeping in mind how far that you're tracking for. Keep in mind it's going to take time to build up momentum for it, right? Probably at least 2 to 3 seconds. But if we're now got 5 or 6 seconds, we could be losing our altitude and we could be ending off depending on how good of a track you have. So make sure we de-accelerate and throughout the track, we're looking forward for our heading and to the side for our other traffic. The kind of takeaway here for newer jumpers is that we want to make sure you're doing a flat track for break-off. If you're not sure of the difference, or you've never actually seen your track on video, speak to a coach. If your track isn't flat and you're in a dive, you're just ending up eating the altitude, which leaves you without separation. The other common errors for this one is tracking too short, like still leaving you with not enough separation, and then also not bringing yourself to a stop, which can increase your risk of a malfunction on opening. It'll probably hurt a little bit. or some line twists. We want to keep scanning for others all throughout this and be ready to alter our course. If someone's too close, change your direction, don't wait. And by making sure that you've been watching the entire time, you'll know if you're safe to change your direction. Otherwise, you could just be putting yourself into a collision course with another jumper. Finally, on to kind of deployment tier, the most critical task in the air. Going back to, I think this is just my USPA training, but we've got our pull priorities in order of pull, number one, pull at the correct altitude, and pull at the correct altitude while stable. Stable being at the bottom of that list. If you're at your pull altitude, but you're on your back, your priority is pulling, not getting onto your belly. That said, there are things to consider here as long as you've met your pull priorities. We should be pulling at or above our planned altitude and not lower, even if things go sideways. If you can afford the altitude, take the extra second to settle. A smooth pull is going to be a safer pull. Our body position is really going to be reflected in how clean our opening is. Sometimes you might get away with it. Other times you're like, oh, I wonder why I had a 180, off heading opening. Chances are it's you and not the canopy, although there's some exceptions there. So we want to be stable. We want to be symmetrical. You can get someone to video you for your opening if you really want to know. We just want to create a clean deployment, especially for the pilot chute. We should be making sure that nobody's directly above you, below you, and making sure we communicate with our wave off. I think it's the more jumps you do, it's easier to forget about the wave off. Or it might just look like you're flailing your arms, right? It should be very deliberate. And speaking of like intentionality, we shouldn't just let it happen. We should perform our deployment with purpose. A lazy deployment, like not being intentional with throwing the pilot chute, can result in its own malfunctions. After pulling, we want to keep our eyes peeled around us for our canopies that are opening and being prepared to immediately grab rear risers and being ready to take action if needed. If things are going wrong there, the good thing is we've trained for this. If you can't remember your EPs or it's been a while or you're due for them, make sure that you're talking to the appropriate coach or instructor for that. You might get redirected if, depending on the coach, because some of us can't do those. That's not because we don't want to tell you. We just want to make sure you're going to the right person for those. I'll just wrap up here with some takeaways. We should know our limits. We shouldn't be chasing dives that we can't control or we're not ready for. We want to make sure, regardless of the discipline, we're flying predictably with others. Staying altitude aware is both checking early, but also checking often. And we should break off decisively. We should be clear, confident, and on time, tracking like we mean it, and deploying with purpose. Make sure to tap into your resources, like the PIMs. Every time they get updated, they're more and more clean, and they have some great illustrations in them. Use your coaches, and just use your head, I guess. So my focus for the season will be belly. So if you want to do some belly jumps, come find me at the DZ. Thank you.
I do, Riley. I want to do belly with you.
Love it.
I'm like literally watching. I know there's more people on the call, but Beth happens to be at the top of my like screen here, and all I see is Beth doing.
And Donnie.
Yes, and then Donnie popping in, being like, "Yeah." Riley, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Riley about any of the topic of kind of in the air in your skydive? No questions. Well, Riley, you've answered you've answered it all. No one's got questions. Thank you so much. I think you're at work because you have your scrubs on. So
I'll be going now.
I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Perfect. So I'm going to go back into sharing my screen. Good old multitasking here. And all right. Current slide. Did it switch over for you? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
No, it still says Riley in the air. Oh,
it didn't switch now to Brandon? Okay, well, weird. I don't know why it's not switching for Gord. Hopefully it's switching for you guys. I'm excited to bring forward Brandon Ballard. Brandon's going to present today for the portion under canopy and the landing. All that fun stuff where, according to our aims, that's where the most dangerous stuff happens as well. So without further delay, I am going to ask Brandon. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll get Brandon Ballard on here.
Awesome. We good to go?
You are good to go. Thanks, Brandon.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. So yeah, I can almost kind of pick up right where Riley left off there with starting right from the top when you're opening your canopy. You know, like Allison just mentioned, canopy is piloting is arguably the most important part of the skydive. It's just as important to have a planned canopy ride down as it is to have a planned free fall. You know, there's so many things to take into account with that. And you know, the difference between having a great landing or a bad landing could be a really good day or a trip to the ER or even possibly worse consequences, as much as I hate to say it, right? So it's super important that we're paying attention with our canopy skills. So yeah, I'm going to start from the top with when you open. It's really important to make sure that even before you're doing your line checks or anything like that, and your canopy flight control checks, that you know you're looking around and making sure that you're not coming right into somebody. You know, you could end up opening up and doing a 180 like Riley had mentioned, and somebody else could already be flying right at you, and you want to be able to sorry, my cat just jumped up on me. You want to be able to react to those situations accordingly. Or you could be opening and having an emergency procedure, and are you ready to execute that right away? You know, somebody could, if you had a bad track, somebody could have opened right next to you and you're having an emergency procedure. So it's really important right from the top on when you open to pay attention to what's going on around you. Sorry, just looking at my cheat sheet here. Another point that I'm going to steal from Dustin's book is just assume that other people can't see you. He mentioned this last year, and it really spoke to me because, you know, when you're flying and acting like no one can see you, then you can react accordingly to yourself. So it's really important that you're not only paying attention to what other people are doing, but pay attention to what you're doing too. And then, so moving on from your opening, I'm going to get more into do the flight, the actual flight. So you've done your flight control checks, you know that your canopy's good and you're ready to rock and roll and fly down to the ground. You know, one of the big things is, are you flying predictably and safely for the people around you? You know, are you making sure you're looking around? There's no hazards in the air. You're not going to run into anybody. Have you identified everyone in the air? You know, if somebody's landing off, they might not be around you, so, or you can't see them. You know, it's really important to identify who's around us, and especially at Cessna drop zones, we kind of get in the bad habit of, oh, there's only 4 of us in the air, or only 6 of us in the air, and you know, we think we have so much sky to ourselves, but you know that distance can close really quickly if you're not paying attention. So it's really important to pay attention for who's around you, because also not only that, you know, some people might have the right of way, like a reserve ride or tandem instructor, or if there's a student below you. It's really important to make sure you identify who has the right of way, who's setting the pattern, where everybody is, so that you can fly predictably, fly safely, fly accordingly, do maneuvers accordingly. You don't want to 360 down and then end up right in front of someone who's practicing their flares or something. So yeah, that's just super important to make sure you're right on top of all that stuff. Sorry, just looking again. Another thing that I want to touch on with your canopy piloting is it's important no matter what skill level you're at, whether you're just got your A and you're working on your canopy drills, or your B, you're working for it, or if you're doing coaching stuff or even further, it's always important to be practicing your basic canopy piloting skills at a safe altitude. You know, above whatever altitude you've set, that is going to be safe for you before you need to make sure that you're executing your landing pattern. Typically, you want to do this in your holding area at a safe altitude. So, you know, practicing your turns, your flares, your low turn recoveries, stuff like that is all very important no matter what skill level you're at, because that can save you in a case where something could be going wrong at the last moment. So it's doesn't matter where you're at, it's important to be practicing that. And then I'm going to move from there into your landings, which is arguably even more important than the rest of the piloting stuff, because this is where the injuries happen. This is where it can change. So it's really important to make sure that you're super aware on your landing, and that not only you're aware, but you're prepared. You're prepared before the skydive. You know, have you gone through and done your checks for hazards on the ground. Have you been paying attention to the winds? You know, if you're landing off, where are you going to land? Have you identified the hazards in the off areas? So hazards is a big one, and turbulence and anything else that can throw off your canopy piloting skills. It's very, very good to pay attention to that. And not only that, but our weather changes all the time. I know, especially at SVI, because we take the van to get to the airport. By the time you're up in the plane, the wind can be 180 direction, you know, an extra 15K an hour, and you're like, well, this is what I planned for. So it's definitely good to prepare to make changes in the air at a safe altitude. And not only is it important for you, but it's important for everybody else around you too. So leading into that, it's going into that, I'm going to go to patterns, right? It's important. Most DZs have preset patterns. Some DZs, if you don't follow their pattern, that's it. You got like one strike and you're done. You know, big ones like Eloy and other places like Paris, Dubai, they all have designated flight patterns that you need to stick to. And the number one priority isn't to land directly into the wind, kicking the cone, impressing everybody. The number one priority is to land safely. And sometimes that comes with a crosswind, sometimes that comes with a downwind. You know, if the person leading ends up doing a downwinder, you don't want to be the person who's like, oh, but I want to land into the wind and start a jousting match with the rest of everybody else coming down, right? So it's super important to pay attention to who's below you on landing, or if you're setting the pattern, you want to set everybody up for success. And then not only that, but even when you're on the ground, it's important to pay attention, or if somebody else has a bad landing, are they going to be okay? You know, you want to pay attention to if somebody's coming straight at you and, you know, you're just doing up your lines, la-di-da, and then, you know, somebody comes in and hits you. It's important all the way through. The skydive's not over until you're back in the building and you're packing your parachute, as I like to think of it. Sorry, just gonna look for a couple more things here. Another thing I wanted to bring up is target fixation. That's a big one coming in for landing. You typically end up going where you're looking. So, you know, hazards can move. Sometimes we bring the van out to the field. Typically, we're good about not parking it in the field, but who knows? Maybe somebody on the jump ahead of you had an accident and there's an ambulance on the field, right? You just don't know what could be there. Or we did have a situation last year where some cows got out on the field. So that is definitely a big obstacle to watch out for. And sorry, my wife's laughing at me. It's a big obstacle to watch out for. So you really need to make sure you're not like, oh, there's a cow in the field, because if you're staring at it, you might just end up right in front of it, and it might not be so kind to you. You know, other things to consider are calculating things on your final, like what are the winds doing? Did anything change in the last 1,000 feet? You know, are you getting lift? All these things you need to be able to account for when coming in. So it's important to determine the winds, set yourself up for success. And then a couple other Dustin points that I'm going to leave you with before I finish off here are, sorry. Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, I got lost my notes. Receiving training before trying a new skill under canopy is crucial. You don't want to just go up there and think, oh, you know, I can do a swoop. I got this. That's definitely not the way to go about it. You want to make sure you receive the proper training, and some good ways to do that are through coach courses like Flight 101, 102. All the flight courses are great. I've personally done them, and they tremendously helped with my canopy piloting skills. It's worth it. It's your life. It's to be taken seriously. So I highly recommend getting the proper training with that. And yeah, my very last point on the canopy side of things is going to be downsizing. It's a very important part of progression, but it's also a dangerous part of progression if you don't do it properly. And this can even lead to both ways. If somebody's too light for the canopy they're on, but they're scared to downsize, that can also be a problem, because there could be instances where somebody's so light they can be pushed backwards if the wind's strong enough. So it's really important to make sure that you're picking the canopy that's correct for you to fly. And it's important to make sure that you're not just basing it off a chart you found online. Yes, there's great charts. Brian Germain is an awesome chart with reliable statistics. But at the end, everybody has a different skill level. and a comfortability, and everybody learns at a different pace. Not everybody gets up and rides a bike the first try, so it's important to make sure that you're doing it according to your skill level and that you're not trying to go above and beyond it. And I know it's super common for new skydivers, and I was super guilty of this. It's just being so eager to downsize. I bugged Gord so much about downsizing last year, and poor Gord had to deal with me. But at the end, I'm very grateful that he coached me a bit and helped me wait and have the patience, and just it made me really focus and want to be that good canopy pilot so I can get on it. So it's good to make sure that you're checking off those core boxes, like can you land safely, accurately, standing up in any wind condition, any weather, on a consistent basis. And that goes to say also without screwing everybody else up on the pattern, right? You want to make sure that you're able to accomplish those things as well, not just looking at the charts. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with for some references, the PIMs are always great if you want to learn more about canopy piloting skills. PIM 2C specifically has great information on how to land accurately and safely. It talks about different wind conditions. It talks about how to set up for accurate landings and so on and so forth. So that's all I really have to say about the canopy part of things. Just play safe, pay attention, make sure you're aware of everyone around you, and have fun.
That was awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much. And yes, Gord was nodding quite a bit when you were talking about your downsizing.
I think everybody got annoyed with me last year.
Oh yeah, and it happens, and that's okay. But you ask questions, right? And I think that's number one. It's you didn't just go, I'm doing this, and go somewhere else and do it. Like ask questions to people, and yeah, take the courses. Does anyone have any questions for Brandon? Yeah, this is a quiet.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Brad.
Just in regards to, looking cool under canopy and downsizing and going super fast. I think there's nothing cooler than landing exactly where you want to on 2 feet every single time.
Yeah.
And before you even think about downsizing, if you cannot do that consistently, there's no point in even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that should be like your bare minimum,
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't matter if you're flying a 170, if you can put it down right on the cone on 2 feet, everybody's going to cheer for you, right? So that's the thing you should be striving for before you even think about, going super fast or doing big turns or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And I think just to add to that too, always be cognizant of your wing loading. Just because you were happy flying a 150 or a 130 or a 68 or whatever they come in last year, if your weight, you've gained another 15 pounds or 20 pounds over the winter, that definitely impacts your performance. And then you add not being current on top of that. So yeah, speaking from someone that gains winter weight all the time, it does change things. So
yes, Christmas and Thanksgiving will do that to you.
Yes, right. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. Brad, thanks for adding that extra tidbit as well. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share.
Always. All right, so I'm just going to go back into sharing my screen. And whoops. All right, so this now is moving us into some special topics. We call it Stay Informed. And so Gord keeps telling me it's not changing for him. It's so weird. I don't know why it's doing that.
Go to the next. You can go to the next one.
It's still on canopy landing for us, Allison.
Is it now changed?
So unshare and then reshare. See if that helps it.
That's so weird. Sorry, I'm just going to try this again. Only because this will mess up my recordings. Not really. It's just a share, but sorry, guys. Okay, well, let's try that. Is that better?
That's better now.
We have Ashley.
Oh, but it's not even doing full screen. Weird. Anyways, technical difficulties that don't really matter. Ashley. So we have this section now is there's a couple of presenters coming. Ashley is a coach too, and very active at our drop zone as well. And she's going to talk about safe progression and the dangers of complacency. Ashley is also at work. So
this is true.
This is everybody. I appreciate everyone's time in doing that. So Dustin, I think you're sharing the screen, and Ashley, you are presenting.
Yeah, so I do apologize. I'm not going to video my screen on my behalf just because I'm at work and it's just patient confidentiality here. And I'm not cool enough to have my own office or anything. So instead I've made a PowerPoint, or I should say Dustin has graciously helped make me a PowerPoint to go through and kind of talk to you guys about safe progression and the dangers of complacency. Something I think that we can all say that we've kind of been there, and a topic that we know all too well. So with that being said, we will click through. Okay, so what is safe progression? Safe progression to me is a methodical approach to increasing skills and experience, training, practice, and improving at a pace that suits your current skill level. And we're all in a place, I feel like, that we're moving forward always, whether that be learning to skydive as a student or a novice, to learning specific disciplines, and then honing in on those skills. So there's always room to grow and to progress. And it's just all about doing it in a safe fashion that is going to keep you skydiving for longer. So what are some common examples of unsafe progression? So I have here some, and I'm sure they're going to be similar to everyone else: overconfidence, as Brandon kind of touched on, some downsizing, maybe downsizing too quickly, attempting skills outside of your limitations and knowledge. And I think that's really a key point there, is limitations and knowledge. And also not reviewing our EPs regularly, doing things that may or may not put us into dangerous situations. And then what are we doing to react in those situations? So clicking through to the next slide, Justin. Pathway of safe progression. So how do we progress safely in skydiving? So for me, I think safety is a key component to skydiving, and I know many are going to say safety is third, but it is super important that we hone in, especially on our newer jumpers, that safety is so important. It is, again, what brings us back to being able to jump for years and years to come, hopefully without injury. So progressing safely, looking at following the COP standards, following BSRs and TRs. CSPA and the many, many volunteers have graciously put together years of work to create standards and rules and regulations for us. So for our safety at the end of the day, in order to keep us safe and keep us jumping. So they're there for a reason. We should essentially follow those things. Listening or seeking out advice from coaches and instructors. Nobody wants to be the Debbie Downer in the room, but if somebody's telling you you are maybe not ready for a skill or not ready for a progression, we should probably actively listen to that. And if at bare minimum, just ask why, so then we can understand what those reasons are in order to then maybe create some goals in that direction. Not trying anything that you haven't received training on. I know something that I hear a lot about, at least on the from different people that I've talked to. Oh, so and so said we should go do this type of jump, or oh, this person invited me on this jump. And when I ask, oh, like, have you done a tracking jump before? Have you ever flown on your back because now you want to go sit fly? And the answer is no. Well, it's like, oh, I don't necessarily know if this may be the right jump for you in this very moment, or maybe we need to have a discussion about how to do these skills so you can be successful on that jump going forward. And another good kind of progression of safety, care of equipment. Are you using equipment that's appropriate for you? Do you have the right gear for the type of skydive that you wish to complete? Is your rig free fly friendly if you're going to do a free fly? So we don't have people blowing up rigs, as Allison unfortunately has experienced. So yeah, being sure that you have the right equipment for you that keeps you the safest. Another thing I think that's super important and we don't always highlight is just being examples to others, making sure that we are representing ourselves, our ability, and the sport in a positive light. So that way, those that are newer or with less experience have good role models to see what safe skydiving actually looks like. And also taking courses in camps, participating in training, sign up for those Flight One courses, sign up for the intro to angles or intro to like a wingsuit. Seek out that knowledge that is available to you, both in courses and camps, or even just in a one-to-one kind of interaction. I know Allison's going to be running some three-way scrambles this season for belly flying. So if that interests you, if getting more proficient on your belly and going into maybe four-way or six-way or bigger ways, if that's something that interests you, then seek out the individuals at the drop zone that know about that. Go find Beth and Donnie. Go find Riley or Derek Smith or myself and Dustin. Seek out those individuals that have some experience that can help kind of guide you in a safe progression. All right, so moving on a little bit. Complacency. What is complacency? I kind of have a small definition that is when you stop being alert or stop following safety protocols due to overconfidence, familiarity, or just simply getting used to it. I have a nice little Dan BC quote here as one of the worst things you can do in skydiving is underestimate the risk in any given jump. And I could definitely speak to my own experience that I've been complacent in far too many jumps. Experience that is kind of scary, and it's eye-opening, and it can happen just so quickly, so simply. For me, I jump often with the same individuals, and sometimes I rely on those individuals to be like, oh, yep, it's time to pull, or not pull, it's time to track away, like break off. And I've caught myself a couple times where that other individual isn't saying, oh, it's break off time. And then I look at my altimeter and I'm like, oh crap, we should probably get going. Or we're trying to get that last point. So you fight for it, and then you look and you're like, ooh, I should probably go. So it's definitely happened to me, and it's just it's not overconfidence, but it's just familiarity. It's like, oh, that I'm jumping with Dustin. He's going to turn and track away anytime now, and putting that onus or reliance on him is wrong. I need to be more focused on my own altitude awareness. So it's definitely something that I keep in the back of my head all the time, every single jump, because it's so easy to develop, sadly enough. Moving on a little bit, how does complacency develop? Kind of from my examples given is repetitive jumps without new challenges, overestimating one's ability on experience, and letting routine practices slip, like pre-jump checks or equipment inspections. It's so easy to just grab your gear and go and be like, everything's fine. And then you get to the airport and you're like, oh crap, I don't have XYZ. Or you're in the plane being like, did I turn that altimeter on? Like, or my AED on or anything like that. So it's so easy to do. So it's something that we really need to hone in on and keep a mindset that complacency is what can get us in trouble. So just create a routine, but stick to it in a sense that you're going to be safe and making sure that you're doing all those checks. And it's the same thing in the sky. Don't rely on your buddy. Make sure that you are aware of yourself, or for yourself, essentially. Next, skipping safety protocols. Yeah, improper or no equipment checks, disregarding inappropriate conditions, whether it be landing, weather, not practicing your EPs, distracted, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, kind of all things that we've touched base with in previous discussions and in this one are all so important that we keep reminding ourselves of. And again, if you're having a bad day or you're not fully there, physically, mentally, whatever's going on, nobody's ever going to be upset that you didn't jump. The only person that's going to be upset is you if you hurt yourself. So don't do it. All right. Fun little video for everybody, if it works.
Dustin, just make sure that you optimize the video. If you're familiar with that in Zoom, just make sure if you play it, you optimize it for video play.
Yeah, Dustin. So just a fun little video for everybody, just about how complacency can happen so easily. Woohoo. So I'm sure this is a video that a lot of you have seen before or something similar. So what happened here? We saw three jumpers come out of the plane and yeah, we're having a great skydive, working to get to one another, come together, break apart, come back together. But at the end of it, complacency of nobody being the one to check their altitude, so complacency with altitude awareness, just hyper focused on each other and wanting to get those points in or get those docks in rather than being aware of their surroundings. And some of that could be a reliance on one another to indicate break off, which unfortunately neither jumper did, and ultimately resulted in the AED fire to both parties. And it's easy to it's easy done, but it's a reminder of why it's so important to be aware of your surroundings, be aware of your altitude, not rely on that other person or people within your group to indicate break off or whatever that may be in that skydive for you. Next, complacency avoidance. How can we avoid kind of falling into those traps? So some regular review of safety protocols is really important, hence why we do safety day. And although it's only once a season, it's still so important to be reviewing those EPs and having those chats with fellow jumpers about essentially being safe and equipment checks and canopy controls and all those things. So it's so important that we chat with one another. If there's never a bad or silly question, if something is unclear or you're unsure, just ask. You'll never be in trouble or made fun of for asking a question. I'd much rather somebody do that than do something really stupid in the sky and then have to come and give you shit afterwards for it. Pardon the language. Maintain self-awareness, staying vigilant, and committing to continuous learning are all important points to helping avoid complacency and just improving your skydive experience all around. So in conclusion, as much as Broken like Brian is going to hate me for this, safety is non-negotiable. It should probably be number 1, but it's 3, whatever. Respect your limits. There's nothing wrong with setting boundaries, but also let's create some goals. Let's be successful in those goals, but let's be safe when we're doing it. And then always be safe, have fun, and that way you can get your ass back to the drop zone in a safe and mediocrely fun way. All right, thanks everyone. Questions, concerns?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. Love that last picture. I was like, oh, is that Tico? No. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing all that information. Does anyone have any questions for Ashley? No. And Ashley is at work, so thank you, Ashley, for taking that time out to help us.
Of course, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to try sharing my screen, see what goes on here. I don't know what's happening. Hopefully it's now Beth. Is that Beth up there?
Yeah, that's me. I don't know where you got that awful picture, but
I love that picture of you. What are you talking about? I love it. I should actually mention that a lot of these pictures were taken by Derek Smith at our drop zone. So kudos out to him for all the great pictures we've been getting the past couple of years. So Beth is going to be talking about another stay informed topic is the separation anxiety, talking about exit separation and tracking separation. So Beth, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Yeah, forgive me. I'm not really a Zoom person, but I think I've got this. Do you see my cover page?
We do.
Okay. So Ashley took the shock and awe, I think, from me. I had lots of videos and shock and awe last year. Not so much this year. I'm going to be brief. Don't have as much excitement here, but Ashley's video certainly was exciting and a good wake-up call for everybody. So Riley did a really good job of the whole free fall portion and going through a lot of really important parts. So my focus was really just take a few minutes to talk about separation and how important it is. Specifically, adequate exit separation and proper tracking separation. Understanding and respecting free fall separation is key skill in avoiding free fall collisions, and I think you'll all join me in agreeing that we all want to avoid injury due to free fall collisions this summer. So hopefully I can get my screens to go forward. I did, amazing. So really quick, what we talk about when we say separation, what we're talking about is distance away from each other. And we learn the basics of exits and tracking separation in our regular progression through the PIMS and through our coaching and instructing. But I think that it's important to understand that our approach to separation has to mature along with our skydiving experience. It's very situational, and it's maybe a bit of an abstract concept, I think, to understand, or maybe it's just abstract for me. But it's not a clear black and white. So it's great to revisit it at a safety day, on an annual or even more regular basis, and how we might need to approach our attitude towards separation a little bit differently as we grow up in the sport. So I know we talk a lot about, when you get to a bigger drop zone or when you start jumping bigger airplanes, but this presentation isn't just another when you start getting bigger kind of presentation. These skills apply regardless of how big the aircraft is or how big your formation is or how much experience you have. So please keep in mind that exit separation applies on smaller planes, even a C-182 as well. So quick poll. We're gonna just gather thoughts. What factors should we consider when we're determining time between exits? What am I doing on the skydive? How large is the group I'm jumping with? How big is the group before me? Who's behind me and what are they doing? How fast is the plane moving? What is everyone's experience level? Oops, my apologies. I think we all know that the answer is G, all of the above. We talk a lot, actually, I think it's on the next slide. The PIM-2B does say we want to leave at least 5 to 10 seconds separation between groups, depending on the strength of the upper winds and the aircraft exit speed. Wind speed and ground speed are definitely factors in our exit separation consideration, but there's a fair few other things that should also be considered. First off, group size, the size of the group you're jumping with, the group ahead of you, and the group behind you. Larger formations have higher break-off altitudes a lot of times, and sometimes they'll even have tracking groups. And with their higher break-off altitudes, they'll be tracking for a longer distance. So even if you're just doing a solo, if you're going out after a large group, say an 8-way, that group's going to track a lot further and a lot faster than a small group of 2 that you might be following out. So your solo jump, you need to consider who's getting out before you. If there's 2 relatively large groups getting out one after the other, even more of a factor, because both groups will be breaking off earlier and tracking further and could potentially track into each other's column of air. Experience level as well. Again, your experience level as well as the individual or groups ahead of you and behind you. Experience level is going to affect a few things. The distance that you're going to be able to make in your track and the direction of track. A lower experienced jumper might not reliably stay off the line of flight. They may track up or down the line of flight by accident, or they might kind of track around in a circle. Also, lower experienced jumpers tend to count really fast. Don't anybody shake your heads, because I know you're guilty of this, because I was. Everyone is. We're so excited and amped up to jump. We're just got a solo certification or an A license, or even we're just like first jump back in the season and we're just amped to jump and we count. Okay, they just exited 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Okay, I'm going. So The lower experience, the faster they count. A lower experienced jumper might be opening high, and higher experienced jumpers, though, might be wicked awesome trackers and might just track really, really far, threatening the next group after them. This is, many of you have seen this picture before. This is my favorite photo to demonstrate this point. This solo certified jumper in the top there, he just got a little overexcited. He left a little bit early, and he was practicing his track right down the line of flight because he just didn't recognize exactly what was line of flight. So kudos to him. He had a really good track. Like he was practicing really well. He had a great track, but he tracked right into the middle of our formation. We'd gone out ahead of him. So this little meet and greet could have been avoided if we'd done a better job of evaluating who was getting out after us. So that brings us to type of jump. It's also very helpful to know what the groups around you are doing. Variables like high pulls, larger groups with tiered or elevated breakoff plans, novelty jumps like Mr. Bills, tubes, or trains might result in various levels of chaos and various levels of opening altitudes. We learned on this picture jump, even a solo practicing for their A license is worth knowing about and having an educational conversation. Ground speed refers to how fast the plane is moving across the ground. Wind speed affects how far our bodies will travel or drift in free fall. So this is what the PIMs refer to, really, is the speed that the aircraft is moving at. It's very subjective and it's very situational. So if the plane is moving very fast, it's going to cover a large amount of distance, you'll leave less time. If there's a strong headwind and the plane is moving slowly, then you'll need to leave more time. But this is, there's not, I mean, I don't know, there's some simulators that you can find online. I think that the USPA has one. There's a couple of exit separation simulators you can use, but a lot of it really comes down to experience and practice. So because it's very situational, if it's not really clear to you, just ask. Have a conversation with everybody else getting on the plane before you get on the plane, and just have a conversation, dialogue between all the groups. And Gordon and Allison are great about posting the winds aloft as well as the winds on the ground, posting the recommended exit spot, and posting the recommended distance between or time between groups. But again, because of all the variables, Gordon and Allison can't necessarily predict everything that's going on. So please just open the door to a conversation before getting into the airplane. Yeah, that's it for that. That brings us to the tracking separation. And I think that Riley did an amazing job on tracking separation. Like I said in the first slide, there's such a thing as too much togetherness. So when it's time to track, it's time to track. You've got to turn and track when your dinner goes or when the altitude exactly. Time goes very quickly in free fall. So when it's time to break off, you've got to break off right away. So when we're tracking away from the center of the formation, and we're talking about distance from each other. We can see in this picture, people are leaving together. There's a lot more than 2 or 4 people leaving the center of the formation. So they're quite close to each other now, but as they get further away from the formation, they are drifting and separating apart from each other as well. So horizontal separation is, I guess, point number 1. But you also do need to ensure that nobody's on top of you and you're not on top of anybody else. So horizontal separation is the name of the game, but vertical separation is critical also. When tracking, our first priority is direction. We need to go in the right direction, have the right heading. That requires you to look at the ground so that you know you're moving in a straight line. Once you know you're moving in a straight line in the right direction, then you can turn on the burners and start building up speed to get away from the formation. So this requires you to know where the center of the formation is and knowing where your tracking direction is. Again, there's lots of us on the drop zone are happy to help with this on an ongoing basis or just like a quick tutorial. But bottom line is if you're doing more than a one-way, you need to be tracking. Everyone tracks. If you look down and you see that you're really far from the drop zone and you're like, oh man, I'm going to have to walk really far, you still have to track. Okay. Nobody just dumps in place. The exception is if you're the person in the video that Ashley showed. If you look down and you see her that close to the ground, just dump. What questions do you have about separation? And I hope you've taken away your separation anxiety.
Beth, we did have a question just regarding exit order.
Okay.
So the question was, does anyone have something on exit order? There's always been a bit baffled by why bellies are routinely out before the free flyers. So you have a lot of experience. So I thought, well, Beth should answer this question.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's an age-old question ever since the dawn of free flyers. People have asked that question, and it comes down to the drift that bodies get in free fall. So that that wind speed that we were talking about, because belly flyers fall slower, they drift further. So they will drift back, basically away down the line of flight and away. So they get out first, so they keep drifting, and everybody else gets out behind them. They don't drift as far, so the people getting out after them will not drift into them. And also, belly flyers are the #1 most important jumpers on the lake. Thanks, Dustin. Obviously.
I was waiting for that part, but hopefully that.
Oh, Dustin.
Oh yeah, Dustin. Does anyone have any questions regarding separation? And hopefully we helped answer that question. I think it's also important to note too that always check with the drop zone, because sometimes, especially movement groups, they do have different drop zones, sometimes have different plans with movement groups. So it's just really important to check with the drop zone on anything, actually, because something can be different at all drop zones. But
yeah. And the PIM2Bs do have some really good information on exit order and the reason that it is structured the way it is. But again, like Allison said, situationally, especially when there's multiple angle groups, and there's other variables. I mean, the experience level of the groups, maybe there's going to be times it makes sense to have the free flyers go first, or to have a slightly smaller group go ahead of a slightly larger group. So it isn't an exact science, but this is the formula that we've discovered over the years works best in most situations. But evaluating all the variables and making an intelligent decision, often it's going to vary.
Awesome. Well, Beth, it doesn't seem to be any more questions. Thank you again so much. And yes, I always remember your graphics from last year. They were rather entertaining. Scarily entertaining. So Ashley did not disappoint.
Nope.
Much appreciated, Beth.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. So I know you guys just all love hearing my voice. So I'm going to ask Gord. Gord, did that share me?
Yeah, it's you.
All right. So I am going to share some stuff here. I'm going to take a little bit of your guys' time to talk about some culture of safety stuff. And then we're going to go into some AIM reports and then some other fun stuff at the end of that. Just for anyone who doesn't know me other than outside of the drop zone, I'm a member of the Technical and Safety Committee for CSPA. I'm the chair for both long-term athlete development and WIC. And I also am the CSPA safety management system analyst. So I analyze all the AIM report data that we get. So that's kind of me behind the scenes of being involved. If there's things you don't like in CSPA or you want to be involved because you love CSPA, lots of opportunities to get involved, and I encourage it. It's been pretty life-changing for me. So really want to start just talking about the culture of safety. And when I'm talking specifically to that, I'm not going to go heavy and deep with this because this is an initiative of the Women's Initiative Committee this year. So you are going to see a lot of PA side. But what I really want to just boldly address is that at our drop zone, and hopefully as you carry yourself to all other drop zones, there is an absolute zero tolerance for inappropriate behavior. And when I define inappropriate behavior, that not only includes, inclusion and respect for people and integrity for others, we all have different beliefs and systems, and so none of that bullying and that stuff. But I'm also talking about the serious side of things, abuse of power in your experience. If you're a very experienced skydiver, not using that abuse towards more novice jumpers, making sure that you are following a code of ethics, which CSPA strongly carries one in the PIM-5 standard of integrity. I encourage all of you to read it. I am saddened, and it's disheartening to me that in 2025 that I even need to have these kind of conversations. We still see sexual assault, rape happening in our community, in sporting communities, and I'm baffled, and I hope that I can encourage all of you to take a great stand in being mentors in this area, and just not tolerating it. So I'm taking a short note to address that. And as heavy as this topic can be, it's real and it's happening. And I just going to stand strong that at Skydive Vancouver Island, Gord and I it's a zero tolerance. And I really just hope that you guys aren't afraid, whether it's at our drop zone or other drop zones, you have a voice. Please stand up for each other. If you see something happening and you need to confront myself or Gord, please do so. There's also avenues through CSPA to do so. But we are a community and we need to protect each other. It's a hard line sometimes in skydiving. We have things that happen like, show me your titties, you get extra altitude. As much as that is part of the skydiving culture, it needs to not be anymore. We put women in situations that feel peer pressure to do that. And yeah, I just don't want to be actively involved in that, condoning that. So just be on a lookout, not only at our drop zone, but across CSPA for some of these initiatives that are going to be taking place. And again, please be the voice of support and to put an end to this. We should be protecting all of our skydivers in our community and checking our own behavior in that. I'm just going to see if my slide shifts to the next thing. Did it shift to EPs? Yay! I think all of us have seen the APF emergency video procedures. So when we do talk about malfunctions, I know that many of you will rewatch these videos at our drop zone, especially more of our novice jumpers. But I really encourage even the experienced jumpers, don't be shy to go to these links. Refresh yourself on your EPs. Just like Ashley had presented about complacency, we get just reliant on those. Oh yeah, I remember my EPs, or I kind of casually practice them here and there. Watching the videos on them and actually refreshing your brain on them is important, especially as you gain experience, because we may deal with emergency procedures in different ways than you might have when you were a novice. If there is at any point any questions of how to deal with emergency procedures, specifically like, oh, when do I disconnect my RSL or those kind of things, ask questions and make sure you're asking questions that we can help better explain those things to you. I asked a lot of dumb questions around EPs, and I'm grateful I did, because I've had 3, and 2 of them were not supposed to happen on my type of container, and they did. The other video that is produced by the APF is the decision-making process, and that's a really good one because that goes more into the psychological side and having that decision-making. All of us, where you started and where your bottom line was, where like, hey, I don't care if I reach 2,000 feet, doesn't matter what's happening above my head. If it's not, I can't fix it, I'm cutting away. As like mine used to be 2,500 feet and it's 2. Now I've had some experience and now it's a little bit lower than that. But really just gauging yourself and knowing that. And it's okay to ask those questions and always practice those APs. So I'm not going to show these videos. We've done that many times in the past, but I strongly encourage you guys to go find them. And yeah, educate yourself on them. AIM reports. If you know me at my drop zone, you're going to know AIM reports, but I'm a big advocate in them. We learn from the incidences that happen, and it's from the data that we gather that we are able to hopefully prevent fatalities or serious accidents. So no, it could be as insignificant as stubbing a toe that kind of impacted your landing and you're kind of hobbling a little bit because it got in a rabbit hole or whatever. Report those. We need to start identifying these trends. CSPA we have heard the voice of the users. So we have started a new process. They're not, the new forms aren't out quite yet, but they should be in the next, we're just waiting for some translation stuff. We have broken them out from being the one standard form that you guys are used to with a whole bunch of things that you don't know how to answer or what you're supposed to put in there. We've broken it out now into 4 different forms. So if it's a malfunction, incident, or accident that happened on a tandem, there will be a tandem form to fill out, which asks the pertinent questions to tandems. There's going to be one for students. So again, if you're an instructor on here or you're dealing with the student and it's a student, it goes under student. There's an experienced one. That's for all the experienced skydiving. And there's a new one that's happened that we're calling, it's the equipment I can't even say it right now. Irregularities. So this one kind of is trying to help us track stuff, especially for the manufacturing side and educational resources. So excessive line wear, misrouted bridles, 3 rings not being there properly, RSL's not connected up. So things you might find on a gear check, or if you're packing, or if you're a rigger and you see these kind of like, weird things that we just kind of slough off and don't really think about. We're asking people to take the 2 minutes to fill out the report so we can start tracking all of this information and improve our education around that. So hopefully with the changes, it makes it an easier process for everybody. I am a firm believer that 10 minutes of your time filling out a name report, I think is well worth the potential that it could save somebody's life. So if you're not at SVI and don't have me haunting you down with AIM reports, just own that. It's your accountability. Anyone can go and fill out a name report. They're found online, and hopefully share that. AIM reports are not shaming. They're not punitive. The information is redacted. There's no punitive measure coming out of AIM reports. It's purely to gather data and educate, and for us to be able to look at our training programs and just kind of think about those kind of things. Cool. So really quick, the CSPA, we have also developed kind of a report on the current AIM reports that came in through 2024 and some of the trends. I am not going into all of the slides. This is the good tool, is that it's shapes what we want to use in it. But essentially the goal of AIM reports, as I just said, we're just there we want to educate, we want to have some awareness, we want to use the data. Currently right now, last year we saw 101 reports. It's in US, they saw just under 300. I have been very blessed to attend the PIA this past year, and I'm very happy to announce that there are now 7 other countries who have reached out to me to be able to compile all of our information together. So when we look at skydiving as a whole, to be able to pool all our information together is going to be great. But I can assure you that with the number of thousands of jumps that happen in Canada and the probably hundreds of thousands of jumps in the US, we're not getting all the AIM reports. And we need to change that. It needs to become a part of our habits so we can educate ourselves. This is just kind of the historical track. We've been tracking this since 2014. A lot more efforts have been put into it probably since 2020 in seeing that the totals. And they're broken out by tandem, student, experience, and aircraft. And as I said, next year we'll have the equipment side and that a little bit more robust. So as much as I would hope that I would think that our AIM report submissions are going higher because we've been educating more, it's really not changed. It kind of has just fluctuated year after year in the last 5 years. This is down by this is broken out by accident, incident, malfunction, and fatality. We did have one Canadian fatality this past year, but that, thank goodness, stays relatively low. But you can see kind of some of those marks and trends where we're seeing increases and decreases throughout it. Accidents kind of staying a little bit more stable, but we're seeing those incidences definitely on an upward trend, and that's a good thing. We want to prevent these accidents, so I don't want them to get there. If anyone wants more detail on this stuff, there's a tons of stuff on the CSPA website, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys the first glance. It is no surprise when you look at this that landing is usually the number one kind of occurrence types that we see. And then, of course, followed by some deployment issues that we have. But you can see free fall. This is something that's very intriguing to me over the past 3 years. We've definitely just seen this kind of upward trend in free fall incidences. And that actually we have addressed in some of the movement stuff, but we've seen some midair collisions. And although it seems low in the scale of numbers, they're really serious accidents. So they're not, and they're also very trending similar in other countries and associations. Again, this is just experience. I'm not going to look at tandems and students and all that stuff, but for our experience category, kind of similar trends that you're seeing here. You can see that rise in incidences. I think that's great. I do think that's definitely the education side of, like, we're getting more incidences because we're educating that those, even what we think are minor things, they didn't result in a, medical attention, are still important to receive. I do see that trend going up that way. What's that? Because I am getting more incident reports that way. Typically with tandems and students, we do tend to see it more accurate in reporting just because of liabilities on drop zones. This is again by occurrence just for the experience category. You can kind of see that spike in landing and then back. You can look here as well as the deployment kind of rising up in there. So we watch these trends, we compile data. Periodically, we do different things that we're interested in possible correlations. For example, when COVID hit, we have been analyzing the correlation between currency and accidents and stuff like that too. So those are much more in-depth stuff that I won't put up here because we don't need to. Again, some of the factors for experienced jumpers. This year we saw a lot of accounts around deployment issues. Because I'm starting to educate more on the malfunctions and deployments and understanding that, and actually trying to work with some manufacturers to start identifying trends in that stuff. We saw this. One of the key things to note here, and I touched on it earlier in the presentations, is that we saw in the deployment category, 27%, and just the experienced. There was issues in tandems and students, but 27% of the deployment occurrences were actually analyzed, and the root cause came down to packing. This is not a common thing that we have seen on AIM reports where it's actually gone right down to a root cause being packing. Obviously, there's multiple things, that body position, as Riley had talked about as well, but it's really important to know how packing can affect things. And the scary thing on these is that it did lead to hard openings, bag locks, or no main deployment. And specifically on the hard openings, when I've looked over the last 6 years of data, yes, we have hard openings. We know that, but the severity of injury that is occurring from the hard openings is been notably far more severe. We're talking about dislocated shoulders, broken ribs, jumpers being knocked unconscious completely to AED fire. So just be really mindful when you're packing or someone's packing for you. The other kind of side notes on this, landing occurrence still account for 63% of our accidents. And then 27% of those were identified as low turns on final, be it intentional or unintentional. They were low turns. And then with free flying and the free fall stuff, I am watching closely. And although the numbers looked low on the reporting, we've definitely had some scary stuff. We had another midair collision this year with 2 angle flyers in a small group, which one jumper sustained very serious but non-life-threatening injury. And he was a very experienced angle flyer. And so just being mindful of that. And then a couple of you guys have talked about proper gear. So we just look at the horny gorilla. It was mentioned in 2 occurrences this past year. Being really mindful of premature deployments. And if you're not jumping with the proper gear, free fly friendly gear, a horny gorilla is technically a free fly type position. So all the new novice jumpers who are like, I want to do a cool horny gorilla exit, make sure you're not doing it on rental gear. That's not free fly friendly. Yeah, and so just kind of giving that. We did have 2 AAD fires. In both of these, they landed safely. AAD save lives, period. Turn on your AAD. There just doesn't seem to be a reason not to. I'm not going to go through all the general recommendations. There's lots of them. But just kind of giving you this example, on the CSPA website, you will find all of this in reports. The main big report has not been through translation quite yet, but all of the data is there to look at. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, the master report is. And this coming issue of Campera, there's a shortened version of that information. But essentially, my call to action for everyone around AIM reporting is just make sure you're staying informed, you're filling out AIM reports, you're looking to the different resources, asking questions, and just be continuously looking to improve in the area of safety that way. And just to really show you guys, so on the CSPA website, if you see the safety tab, you'll see it says occurrence and risk mitigation reporting. We have finally changed the name to, it is a subcategory of a safety management system. It was previously called the safety management system. We have changed it. So in that area there, you can find all of the historical reports, the big analysis, the big everything for recommendations, be it for tandems, DZOs, instructors, coaches, and jumpers themselves. You can also see that that's where AIM reports are. And one of the new things that was just launched with CSPA is we have, again, under safety, there's an area called safety and educational resources. This is new. We are building on it, all the committees and internally. So there's an area there for resources for skydivers, resources for drop zone owners, and resources for riggers. There's stuff in there like the video that I showed earlier about gear checks. There's the gear safety, your checklist, equipment checklist. There's if you're interested in tracking and angle flying, there's a resource guide for understanding some limitations on that. So lots of stuff, and you're going to see more and more stuff available here. And if you don't know, CSPA does have a YouTube channel. And so there's tons of stuff on the YouTube channel as well that you can go into, which I don't have the address here, but I can put it out to everyone. So enough of all of that stuff. Does anyone have any questions or anything around AIMS or anything like that? I can't see anybody, so I'm going to assume.
Oh.
Yeah. If you do, just unmute yourself.
15 questions.
I doubt that. People just probably want me to stop. No questions? No. Perfect. So as you guys know, we run the safety seminar series. We kick it off with Safety Day being today. We do offer, so every Tuesday through the month of April, we do have safety seminars that are open to everybody. Next Tuesday, I do have Dustin Renz from the CWC. He is the chair of the CWC. He is going to be putting on a safety seminar for all coaches and instructors. So if you're a coach or instructor, please feel free to attend that. On the 15th, we have the Bill Pentney, who's the chair of the CSPA Technical and Safety Committee. Him and a team of people, a panel, are going to be presenting for FAA riggers, CSPA riggers, and anyone who packs parachutes. So that is anyone on this call. If you pack your own parachute, attend this meeting, attend this seminar. It's really good information that comes through, and it's more of a question answer session. So it's not so much presentation, it's more of a conversation flow. I'm super excited to, again, for the 5th year in a row, have Erica Dufour and John Kieran from UPT Sigma. They're giving a safety seminar for tandem instructors on the 22nd. And for those of you who are not aware, there is Keen to Lean. It is a new group by Brian Morgan, or Brymo, Emily, Jean, and Derek Clausen. So Jean LaRoche is going to be on the 29th, giving a virtual safety seminar on movement, specific to track and angle flying, not wingsuiting. So hopefully you guys can take part in that. Next cool thing, we have so many events happening at our drop zone. We will not be hosting a boogie, so please tell your friends. Skydive Vancouver Island will not be having a boogie this year. Instead, we'd like to really focus our time on skills camps, smaller events, competition. And so as you can see from the list, this is just some of it. But some of the highlights, we do have a PFF course going, and Coach One, a whole bunch of CSPA courses going on. The wingsuit competition is coming back. It's our 3rd annual one. We've got Bradley Meyer doing wingsuit camps if you want to learn to wingsuit. Derek Smith has got some belly camps going on. I'm sure Beth would happily be joining in that. The Keen to Lean is that team's coming out for some angle and tracking. John Minos, of course, is coming out. The calendar did go out. I will be putting more information about that actually on our the Facebook pages as well. But one of the things that I'm really excited about, and I think Ashley mentioned it, is that every month we're going to have a Saturday night fireside event. So what this means is we're going to have a Saturday night where we're doing music bingo, or maybe where we're having the big projectors onto the event center, just to have a nice little fireside get together. And then the following day will be our three-way scramble events. And so that's for people who want to get involved with belly. It doesn't matter your experience level. This is a way for novices and more experienced people to all get together and have a little fun, crazy event going on. Before I end that, is there any questions regarding any of our events or any of them? I'm going to stop sharing this really quickly because this is the point where we're going to start going into our own. Yay. Hi, there I am again. This is the point where we're going to go back into our own drop zone specific stuff. So if you have any questions at this point, anyone? Okay, everyone's so quiet. So for those of you who are not from Skydive Vancouver Island, you are still welcome to stay on the call for sure. But if you wanted to jet off at this point, everything kind of from here on now is going to be very drop zone specific. But thank you so much to those of you who have attended that might want to hop off the call now. Otherwise, I am going to pass the floor over to Gord. I'm not going to share the screen, but tell me when you're ready for the video.
Oh, okay. Oh, the video?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. I'm Gord. I think I know everybody. But if you don't know me, well, I think we have bigger problems to worry about that.
There's people from other places.
Oh, I suppose there is. Yeah. So Alison and I are the drop zone owners here at Skydive Vancouver Island. And thanks so much for coming to this little event that we put on every year. So I got about a half dozen things to cover real quick. This shouldn't take too long at all. The first list is aircraft. What do we have this year? Did Alison get a Navajo over the winter? No, she did not. So
I tried really hard.
So we have our 182 still, and which has always been the backbone of the operation. The 206, though, I have some good news about it. And so for people that have been with us for a few years, they might have noticed that the climb rate's been slowly degrading over time, and we think that we figured it out now. And so the wastegate on the turbo was not performing to its maximum capacity, and so we're in the process of putting that back in, and we'll be doing some flight tests with it in the next couple of days. And yeah, we're hoping it's going to be back to flying as fast as it used to do, and all the great things that we do with it. I'm really hoping this year with the aircraft that we get the opportunity to do some more formation loads at the end of the day. And so we're going to try and manipulate some of our tandem scheduling to make it a little bit more conducive to help support sport jumpers looking to do fun, big things like that. So it could be great to have 10 parachutes in the air at once without having to use the Skyban. Stuff at the facilities. So we're obviously going to be at Arbutus Meadows again this year. And thanks so much to Sam and Rob and the Bow family for hosting us there, as they always do. A couple of small changes is the camping. We used to sort of be up in the top parking lot, down in the other designated camping area. This year, Rob would like us all to just be in the camping area, which is okay. That means we can hang out and we can try Dustin's mead down there and let him cook food for us at the barbecue, which is nice. So thank you, Dustin, for that. So the camping area is down where we are, park our RV. The event barn washrooms will be accessible 24 hours a day. So the event barn is the smaller barn right next to the big building that we pack in. And but the washrooms in the main building that we pack in are actually going to be closed for most of the season because they're going to be renovating. They got some big changes that are happening at Arbutus Meadows, and so but we have access to the other one, which is pretty much just as close. So that's not so terrible. Sadly, the lavender shop will most likely not be open this year. As they're making some changes to the area, as I said, and it was a lot of work for a really quiet year last year. So unfortunately, we won't have that. So I guess we'll be striking up the barbecue a little bit more than normal and doing our own thing. We do have the opportunity if we have a busy weekend. Sam and Rob have said it'd be fine to bring in a food truck or something like that. So there might be opportunities where we do stuff like that. And of course, there will be for some of the big events that they have, like the 5K Foam Fest, and they're still going to do a couple of other markets, and so there'll be food trucks for that type of stuff as well. The big change that's going to happen in the main building that we operate in is the bike guys are leaving at the end of May, and they're building some pickleball courts inside that building. I have no idea how much that's going to echo throughout the whole building, but they're going to start construction of the pickleball courts in June. And they're hoping to have it ready, I think, for October or September, I think. And so there'll be a little bit of overlap. They expect the pickleball courts to be probably busier in the winter months than they are in the summer, because in the summer people could just go to an outdoor pickleball court and have some fun. And so that'll be our partner in that area there. And yeah, so lots of cool stuff going on there. I don't know if Emily has anything extra to add to that, because she's one of the primary drivers behind all the great things happening at Arbutus Meadows. She's got Rob's ear. So, Emily, do you have anything else to add to that as I throw you on the spot?
No comment for now.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
Rest assured, I will make sure there's some sort of coffee at the drop zone.
Yeah.
For us.
Sorry about that, guys.
There you go. It's all good.
No need to be sorry.
The student field closure. So usually every year around the end of May, we have to close the student field for a little bit. It's a funny cycle of trying to figure out how fast the hay is going to grow before we can land on it without damaging it. Last year, I think it was only maybe 2 weekends at the end of May, and then the front field ended up opening up. So if you're a license holder or a student or novice or whatever right now, we'll just sort of stay in touch and we'll see as to how it goes. The 5K Foam Fest, which is the big event that ends up opening up the front field, is I think it's the first weekend of June or last weekend of May.
That's the last weekend of May.
So that's actually going to help us a little bit, because it's going to speed up the time when we can land on the front field. Let's see. We got a bunch of new staff this year. So Aiden will still be around. He's going to be doing maybe a few less tandems this year, and wants to concentrate more on PFF development. And he's also LFing, learning facilitating, I guess, with putting on some different courses as well. So we brought in, and I'm kind of looking at my own self, and my health over the last year has not been great. So I'm probably going to be doing a few less tandems as well. So we brought in 2 full-time tandem instructors for this season, and we're expecting to be a pretty busy season as it is, if it's, based on the pre-bookings that are coming in right now. So we've got two guys. They're unfortunately not on the call today because we told them about it last minute. But Joe O'Connor, he's a tandem instructor from England, actually, and a little bit in Australia, I think, and yeah. So he's going to come work for us starting in the middle of April. And then another guy, some of you might know, his name's Gilly. He's from New Zealand, and he worked at Okanagan Skydive last summer. He stopped by our drop zone at the end of the year, I think, right around Thanksgiving, and if he was the guy that gave us a free turkey. Somebody handed it to him at the grocery store. I don't know what was going on there, but he's a nice guy though, and him and his girlfriend will be coming out here. She's a massage therapist, so maybe we'll be able to get a little bit of extra reciprocal stuff out of that, which would be really nice. Our pilots, we have 2 new pilots this year, and I'm excited that they're both on the call here, so we can introduce them real quick. The pilot for our 182, you're probably familiar with. He's been working for us for the last 5 seasons as a tandem instructor and PFF instructor. Ben Kirkland. Yay, Ben! Ben, you can unmute yourself. Do you want to say anything about?
So hard.
You want to say anything about you flying the 182 this year and how excited you are, or not?
No, I'm just excited.
There you go. Ben, as usual, a man of many words. We've now gone over time because Ben talked too long.
So, you can all help me help you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we're excited to have you on. Ben's worked his butt off all winter long, getting his working on his commercial pilot's license, and we're excited to have him on board. I think he's going to have a great time. And maybe a little bit of FOMO, missing out, watching everybody jump out of his plane as opposed to him getting to do that himself. The other pilot we've hired this year, his name's Adbel Elsfi. I don't know if I pronounced your last name correctly, Adbel. He's on the call here as well. Adbel, hey. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, this is Abdel Elsafi. Yeah, I think that's it's short for Abdurrahman.
Oh, there you go. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm working with Airborne since last June. Yeah, it's almost a year now, like 10 months. Yeah, I'm working I did some hours on 286, 182, and 172, 150.
Yeah. So Abdel's been flying pipeline patrol, which means he's been used to flying at 500 feet above the ground.
Yeah, very low level. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be introducing him to what it's like to fly at 12,500 feet with 6 people hanging off your wing on one side. So
yeah, we've never done that. I think
yeah,
we did it once before something.
There you go. So yeah, we're excited to have you on board and join the team. This is everybody here is a lot of our skydivers that come out on a regular basis, and there's a few more that you'll meet as well. So Abdel will be showing up beginning of May. And in the short term before that, Mo's agreed to help us out and do some flying, and depending on what Erwin's availability is, he might help with the training for Abdel as well. So yeah, welcome aboard, Abdel.
Yeah, I'm excited to see everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. And the other sort of quasi addition to the drop zone this year is Derek Smith's going to be around a heck of a lot more. So he's rented an apartment in Nanaimo. He's so dedicated to us, and so he'll be at the drop zone pretty much on a daily basis, and helping with PFF and video, and wanting to find if there's anybody else that's interested in doing some belly or anything like that. So I think
that'll be tough. I don't think we have a belly people out there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. So and so we're excited about that as well. And then and then the usual staff, and I want to thank everybody. To mention everybody that helps out on the drop zone, and be it tandem instructors and PFF instructors and ground control people and coach 1s and coach 2s and everybody. Thank you so much, because it's you all help make this little train move forward, and so we appreciate that.
Just so we don't forget, Jess Applin will be our full-time packer this year. And we are probably bringing on someone through kind of July, August for the weekends as an additional packer. We don't know who that is yet. And I don't know that we have a van driver yet. Do we have a van driver? Oh, maybe we do, because the tandem is
no, we don't.
We don't have.
No, we don't have a van driver. Everybody's looking for a van driving job because they want something fun where you can have naps every half hour. Just let me know.
Yeah.
And so recurrency day. So we've already put it out there. I think everybody's seen it. We're saying April 12th and 13th. I'm looking at the weather forecast right now, and honestly, it looks like only the 13th is going to be kind of a workable day, but we'll sort of judge that based on seeing how things are going. And if you're not on the SVI Fam Jam on the Messenger group, I urge you to join, or the SVI
Not a social
chat skydiving group. Join that as well. That's pretty much where we put everything out. So if you want to find out about that, I will most likely need a couple of jumpers on April the 6th for like one load or maybe two loads as we finish the training for Ben. So we need somebody to hang off the strut and do all sorts of disruptive things and what have you. So so we'll probably be looking for that. So if you're interested in coming out on the 6th for like probably one jump, let me know and we can
but if you want to stay for the whole day or the whole weekend, we are also in the trade show at the event center for the outdoor trade show, and we are going to be having a booth there and have our VR going, the virtual reality going at that for this weekend. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And yeah, as Allison said, the VR will be set up and we're going to have a contest. Whoever's closest to the target by the end of the weekend, you can come try out the VR for free. We've worked it out with the folks at Canopy Pilot IO or whatever they're called to be able to offer as many of them as we want to do. And then so whoever gets the most accurate Canopy Pilot at the end of the weekend gets a free tandem. I guess if you're a sport jumper, maybe you get a jump or two if it happens to be you. So we'll figure that out. And that's about all I have. So I will go back to the couch and relax, and Allison can continue her stuff.
I don't know if anyone has questions for you.
Any questions? Any questions? Any questions for me?
And there's like 3 minutes left, guys. So to my presentation. No, they're just all congratulating you.
Oh, thank you for hosting the event, getting on Married Life. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Brian Forbes, very much. Gord the van driver. Oh, you should be so lucky.
Oh, I would love to. Cool. And then just again, a full list of all of our events are, I already did send in some communications, but we will be posting them. And we have a new tool that is coming for it's called Skydiver. Sport jumper. Anyways, we're working on tools to utilize for you guys to have more accurate information on a day-to-day basis about what's happening at the drop zone. And we'll probably get a presentation. If some of you guys saw that.
I can't see it.
It's too hard to see. But we're going to have the guy who is doing this actually do a virtual call to how to utilize it and everything like that. So we're super excited about that. And then I do have to share my screen for this. And hopefully it works. I just need to get there. All right. Gord, can you tell me if this is... All right. So I'm just going to share this video really quick. I think I optimized it. Hopefully it stays optimized. Maybe, Brian, you can message me if it's not.
Is it playing?
Not yet. Slowly. Oh, why isn't it loading it? Oh, come on. Why isn't it playing it? Oh, jeez. All right, let's figure. Oh, there we go. Is it playing?
Welcome to Skydive Vancouver Island. You're going to have an absolutely awesome time jumping here. I'm Gord Galvin, the drop zone owner, along with my wife, Allison. We're always excited to bring in experienced skydivers.
Is it too
glitchy? Today on this video, we're going to go over a few of the rules and guidelines in order for you to jump here. The first one is AEDs are mandatory. Please make sure it's verified by manifest, must be working, must be turned on, all those things. There's an offset between the landing area here and where the plane takes off. So it's important that you understand how to set your altimeter properly for the offset, as well as your AED. There's a 140-foot offset to the B landing area. If you're going into the A landing area, it's a 150-foot offset. Cameras are not allowed unless you have at least 200 skydives and a B, COP, or foreign equivalent. If you don't have that, don't jump with a camera. No high-performance landings over a 90-degree turn unless you've been cleared by me. I want to have a conversation with you and find out what your experience level is, how much training you've had, and make sure you understand all the hazards in the area. It's strongly encouraged if you're going to be trying something new at the drop zone today that you talk to a coach or instructor before you do so. That includes downsizing, trying new disciplines, or even just jumping with more people than what you're normally used to. Safety is the key. We strongly support the Canadian Sport Parachuting Association and the accident incident malfunction reports. So if the event that you see something happen, make sure you fill out a name report and bring it to manifest. Let's talk about outs. There's lots of outs, but there's also lots of hazards in the area. So be aware of your outs before you even get in the plane. On our map, you'll notice that there's 2 large farmers' fields to the north towards the water. To the east, there's some 5-acre parcels of land, and there's some places that we can land there if we have to. A little bit further to the south, there's a remote control aircraft landing area. There's lots of rubble around the outside of it, but the landing area itself is where the runway is pretty good. To the south of us, there's 2 large fields. Be aware that there are some power lines that run way south in that field. And directly across the street, there's also a small field there as well. And right on our own property, we have not only the bee landing area, but also the student landing area and the large field out front. Now, if you're choosing to land in the student landing area, be aware that the downwind leg of your landing pattern is done east to west along the north line of trees. From there, set up your normal pattern, be it a left-hand or right-hand pattern into the middle of the field. If you're landing in the B field, it's also a left or right-hand pattern. First person sets the pattern, and you'll look something like this. If it's a left-hand pattern, you'll start over the trees, work your way along the roadway, over to the gate, and then into the field. If you're doing a right-hand pattern, you'll start over the trees, over the riding rings, to our manifest area, and down in the landing area from there. So we land diagonally from corner to corner into the landing area. The other option, if the winds are coming from the south, will put us over the wall and then across the landing area that way. There are a lot of hazards around our landing areas, so be aware of them all. There's a great big 64,000 square foot building to start with. There's a series of small buildings around the outside of the landing area and the B landing area. There's lots of trees. Some of these trees are up to 200 feet tall. Be aware of those. And along the outside of the B landing area, there's a line of trees as well to keep an eye out for. Thanks for coming out to Skydive Vancouver Island. You're going to have an absolutely awesome time. And we hope to see you again. If you got any questions, just ask any of us. Thank you.
Yay! Gord did that video a couple of years ago, but it was kind of at the same time we did our tandem one. But we haven't decided whether we want to use the video for our briefing or continue doing the one-on-one person thing. There's pros and cons to both. Does anyone have any questions? And of course, when you arrive at the drop zone, we'll probably go through briefings and stuff as we always do. But that is it, guys. That's a wrap. I cannot again, from Gord and I, just continued thank you to everyone who presented today for taking that time out to prepare those presentations, and to just, it's because of you guys that this is able to happen. I strongly encourage all of you guys. I will have this recorded and I'll break it out into sections. Our past presentations are recorded, so please visit. I'll send you guys all the link to our website. And yes, Brian Forbes, we'll see you in July. For those of you, who are just always actively involved and just taking the time out to be here today, I thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can just open up the floor to anyone who wants to say hello, goodbye, or anything. But thank you again on behalf of Gordon and I from Skydive Vancouver Island. Thank you, and stay safe out there.